Nobody believed the shot came from a woman. The operations center fell silent as the data flashed across the screen. Distance, wind, elevation. Every number pointed to the same impossible conclusion. Somewhere on a rocky ridge nearly 2 miles away, a Navy SEAL sniper had just completed a shot that military analysts would study for years. Senior officers stared at the monitors. Experienced operators exchanged confused glances. One commander slowly removed his headset and asked the question everyone was thinking. Who made that shot? For a moment, nobody answered. Then a voice came through the radio, calm and steady. This is Bravo 2. Target confirmed. The room became even quieter because they recognized the voice. It belonged to Emma Walker. The same Emma Walker many people had once laughed at. The same Emma Walker who had been told she would never survive SEAL training. The same Emma Walker who had spent years proving everyone wrong. Outside, the afternoon sun hung low over the mountains. Emma remained motionless behind her rifle, her breathing slow and controlled. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't smiling. She was simply doing her job. The wind brushed across the ridge at 12 miles per hour. Tiny grains of dust drifted through the air. Emma adjusted her position slightly and continued scanning the horizon. Her focus never wavered. Back at headquarters, a young intelligence officer shook his head in disbelief. He had read Emma's personnel file. He knew her reputation. But even he struggled to understand how someone could remain so calm under pressure. The commander standing beside him looked at the screen for several seconds before quietly saying, 8 years ago, nobody thought she'd make it through her first month. Another officer nodded. He remembered the stories. Most people did. Emma Walker had become something of a legend within the community. But legends rarely began the way people imagined. They did not begin with medals, records, or respect. They began with doubt. They began with failure. They began with people looking at someone and deciding they were not good enough. The commander folded his arms and stared at Emma's image on the monitor. Funny thing is, he said quietly, the person who said she'd never make it is probably watching this right now. The room remained silent. Nobody asked who he meant. Everyone already knew. Somewhere thousands of miles away, another man was seeing the same reports. The same headlines. The same impossible accomplishment. Years earlier, he had looked directly at Emma Walker and delivered a prediction with complete confidence. A prediction that seemed reasonable at the time. A prediction he would spend the rest of his life regretting. The memory still echoed through Emma's story even now. 3 simple words. Cold. Dismissive. Cruel. You're going to die. 8 years earlier, on a gray morning outside the gates of BUD/S training in Coronado, California, a 22-year-old recruit stepped out of a worn pickup truck carrying a single duffel bag. Her name was Emma Walker, and nobody there believed she belonged. The air smelled faintly of salt and wet concrete as Emma Walker stepped through the gates of the Naval Special Warfare Training Center. The duffel bag hanging from her shoulder looked almost too large for her frame, and more than a few recruits noticed. Some glanced at her and quickly looked away. Others were less subtle. Conversation slowed as she crossed the parking lot toward the registration building. Emma kept walking. She had spent the last 6 years preparing for this moment. Every early morning run, every extra shift she worked to pay for training, every mile logged with a weighted pack across the hills outside her hometown in Montana had led here. She was not about to let a few stares shake her confidence. A group of recruits stood near the entrance comparing athletic backgrounds. One had played college football. Another had competed in endurance races. Their voices carried across the pavement. Emma heard them discussing pull-up records, swimming times, and fitness scores. Then one of them noticed her approaching. Tyler Brooks leaned against a railing and looked her over from head to toe. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself like someone who had never doubted his own success. Several recruits naturally gravitated toward him. Confidence had a way of attracting attention. Tyler smirked. "You here for the tour?" A few recruits laughed. Emma stopped briefly. "I am here for training." Tyler nodded slowly, as if humoring a child. "That is ambitious." More laughter followed. Emma did not respond. She simply continued toward the building. Behind her, someone muttered that she looked more like a college student than a future operator. Another predicted she would quit before the first week ended. By lunchtime, the rumors had already begun. Nobody knew much about Emma. That did not stop people from inventing stories. Some assumed she had received special treatment. Others claimed the standards must have changed. The reality was much less dramatic. Emma had earned her place exactly the same way everyone else had. She simply did not advertise it. During orientation, recruits filled rows of folding chairs while instructors outlined expectations. The room felt tense. Every person there understood how difficult the road ahead would be. The instructors made no promises. They spoke only about discipline, resilience, and accountability. Emma listened carefully. Most recruits focused on passing. Emma focused on lasting. When the session ended, the recruits filed outside into the afternoon sun. Tyler and several others gathered near the walkway. As Emma passed, Tyler called after her. "Just trying to save you some disappointment." She paused and turned. For the first time, she looked directly at him. Her expression remained calm. "I did not come here expecting it to be easy." Tyler laughed. "That is not the problem." He shook his head. "The problem is that some people are not built for this." Emma held his gaze for a moment before continuing down the path. She did not argue. She did not defend herself. She simply walked away. What nobody noticed was that one of the senior instructors standing near the administration office had been watching the exchange. Chief Mason Reed said nothing. He merely glanced at Emma's file, then back toward the young recruit disappearing into the crowd. Something about her composure caught his attention. Most people responded to pressure immediately. Emma Walker absorbed it. And in a place designed to break confidence, that difference mattered more than anyone realized. The first week passed like a storm that never seemed to end. Before sunrise each morning, recruits lined up along the training grounds while cold ocean air rolled in from the Pacific. The instructors demanded constant movement, constant focus, and constant effort. There were no shortcuts. There were no exceptions. Every recruit faced the same standards. Yet by the end of the third day, an unexpected tradition had appeared among the candidates. A whiteboard hanging near the barracks became known as the prediction board. Recruits quietly wrote names under a simple question. Who will quit first? Nobody officially approved it, but nobody removed it either. When Emma Walker passed the board on the fourth morning, she noticed something immediately. Her name occupied nearly half the list. More than 20 signatures appeared beside it. Some recruits laughed openly whenever they walked past. Others simply nodded as if the outcome had already been decided. Emma stared at the board for only a second before continuing toward formation. She had learned years earlier that people often revealed more about themselves than about their target. During endurance runs, Tyler Brooks remained at the front of the pack. He performed well and knew it. Every success seemed to increase his confidence. Every time Emma fell behind, he noticed. Every time she struggled, he remembered. One afternoon after a long conditioning session, recruits gathered near the equipment shed to refill water bottles. Tyler leaned against a fence and pointed toward the prediction board. "Looks like the vote is unanimous." Several recruits laughed. Emma unscrewed her canteen and drank quietly. "You should not take it personally," Tyler continued. "People are just being realistic." Emma wiped a drop of water from her chin. Maybe. The calmness of her answer seemed to frustrate him more than an argument would have. He wanted a reaction. He wanted proof that the pressure was working. Instead, she simply walked away. As the days passed, the board became a source of entertainment for many recruits. New names appeared and disappeared. Some candidates were injured. Others voluntarily left. Yet Emma's name remained firmly at the top. What nobody talked about was the fact that she was still there. Every morning she reported for training. Every afternoon she completed the assigned tasks. Every evening she prepared for the next day. She was not leading the class. She was not drawing attention. But she was surviving. Chief Mason Reed noticed the pattern. During one evaluation exercise, he observed recruits carrying heavy equipment across uneven terrain. Several candidates finished quickly. Others struggled. Emma was somewhere in the middle. Nothing about her performance looked extraordinary at first glance. Then Reed noticed something unusual. While many recruits wasted energy competing against each other, Emma focused entirely on efficiency. Her breathing remained controlled. Her movements stayed consistent. She never rushed. She never panicked. She simply kept going. Later that evening, Reed reviewed performance reports inside the administration building. A younger instructor entered carrying a stack of paperwork. "Walker still hanging around?" he asked. Reed nodded. "Yes." The instructor laughed. "I give her another week." Reed looked down at the file in front of him. Maybe, but he did not sound convinced. Outside, the The sun disappeared below the horizon as recruits returned to the barracks. Conversations drifted through the hallways. Bets were placed. Predictions were repeated. Most people still believed Emma Walker's story would end the same way they expected on day one. What they did not understand was that Emma had stopped worrying about proving them wrong. Her only goal was making it to tomorrow. And sometimes, that was exactly how resilience began. By the time Hell Week arrived, the prediction board had become almost irrelevant. The recruits no longer needed a list to know who they expected to fail. They simply looked around and made silent judgments. The training tempo increased. Sleep became scarce. Every task seemed designed to test patience as much as endurance. Gray clouds drifted over Coronado as teams moved from one challenge to another, carrying equipment, completing drills, and pushing through exhaustion. Faces that had once been confident now looked older. Conversations became shorter. Even Tyler Brooks spoke less than before. The strain was beginning to affect everyone. Yet the assumptions about Emma Walker remained unchanged. Late one evening, recruits gathered outside a temporary shelter while waiting for instructions. The wind coming off the Pacific carried a chill that seemed to reach straight through their uniforms. Emma sat quietly on an overturned crate, checking a piece of gear before the next evolution. A few yards away, Tyler and several recruits spoke in low voices. They thought she was too far away to hear them. "She is running on luck at this point," one recruit said. Tyler shook his head. "Not luck. Stubbornness." Another recruit laughed. "Same thing." Tyler glanced toward Emma. "No. Luck eventually runs out. Stubborn people just take longer to figure it out." More laughter followed. Then one recruit asked the question everyone seemed curious about. "How much longer do you think she lasts?" Tyler looked at his watch. "By sunrise tomorrow? I would be surprised if she is still here." Emma heard every word. She continued checking her equipment without looking up. The conversation faded as instructors arrived and ordered the recruits back into formation. Hours later, the night stretched on. The temperature dropped. Fatigue settled over the class like a heavy blanket. Some recruits moved mechanically, relying on routine because concentration had become difficult. Emma felt the same exhaustion everyone else felt. Her legs ached. Her shoulders felt heavy. Every step required effort. But she had learned something important over the previous weeks. The body often complained long before it actually stopped functioning. Near midnight, Chief Mason Reed stood observing a training lane illuminated by portable lights. He watched recruits move through another demanding exercise. One candidate quit. Then another requested medical evaluation. The class continued shrinking. Reed marked notes on a clipboard before his attention settled on Emma. She was not the fastest. She was not the strongest. Yet something about her stood out. Even when exhausted, she paid attention to details. She listened carefully. She conserved energy. Most importantly, she never wasted time complaining. An instructor standing beside Reed noticed where he was looking. "Walker again?" Reed nodded. "She keeps showing up." The instructor shrugged. For now. Reed did not answer immediately. His eyes followed Emma as she moved toward the next station. "Most people spend too much energy proving they belong," he finally said. "She spends hers moving forward." The instructor looked unconvinced. Reed simply returned to his notes. Across the training grounds, Emma adjusted her gear and prepared for another long night. She had no idea that instructors were beginning to notice her. She only knew one thing. When the sun came up, she intended to still be standing there. The sun finally rose over Coronado, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, but very few recruits noticed. They were too exhausted to appreciate it. Hell Week had stripped away comfort, routine, and certainty. What remained was character. As the remaining candidates assembled for another day of training, the class looked dramatically smaller than it had only days earlier. Empty spaces stood where confident recruits had once stood. Some had underestimated the challenge. Others had discovered limits they never expected. Emma Walker stood quietly among those who remained. Her uniform was stained with sand and salt. Her eyes showed fatigue, but they also showed focus. For the first time since arriving, fewer people were laughing at her. Not because they suddenly respected her. They were simply too tired to keep mocking her. Later that afternoon, the recruits were given a brief recovery period. Most collapsed onto benches or sat silently staring into space. Tyler Brooks sat with several remaining candidates near the barracks. The conversation eventually drifted toward Emma. One recruit shook his head. I still do not understand how she is here. Another shrugged. Neither do I. Tyler glanced across the yard where Emma sat alone reviewing notes from a training briefing. Everyone has a breaking point. The recruit beside him nodded. Maybe hers is just taking longer. What none of them knew was that Emma had spent years preparing for moments exactly like these. Long before she ever reached Coronado, she had developed habits that few people understood. Back in Montana, where she grew up surrounded by open land and endless horizons, patience had become part of daily life. Her father often spent hours studying weather patterns before heading into the mountains. Her grandfather had taught her that observation mattered more than speed. As a child, Emma would sit for long stretches watching wind move across grass fields or tracking distant movement across ridgelines. Most children became restless. Emma became attentive. Those quiet lessons had followed her into adulthood. While other recruits focused on surviving 1 hour at a time, Emma instinctively broke challenges into smaller pieces. One task, one instruction, one step forward. Nothing more. Chief Mason Reed began noticing another detail. During exercises requiring precision and observation, Emma consistently performed above average. During one navigation drill, she identified landmarks faster than recruits who had stronger physical scores. During another evaluation, she estimated distances with unusual accuracy. Reed reviewed the results twice to make sure there had been no mistake. There was not. That evening, he found himself studying her training file again. The numbers were respectable, but not extraordinary. Yet the evaluations told a different story. A pattern was beginning to emerge. The next morning, recruits participated in a field exercise requiring them to identify objects placed at varying distances across open terrain. Most candidates struggled with the changing light conditions. Emma did not. She quietly recorded her answers and turned them in without drawing attention. When the results were announced later, several recruits appeared surprised. Emma had finished near the top. Tyler read the score sheet twice before folding it and slipping it into his pocket. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. The assumptions that had seemed so obvious on day one were becoming harder to defend. And while nobody realized it yet, the qualities that were. Allowing Emma Walker to survive this training would eventually make her one of the most respected marksmen in the entire SEAL community. Graduation day arrived beneath a clear California sky. Families filled the viewing area while instructors stood with the calm expressions of people who had seen countless classes come and go. Emma Walker stood in formation wearing the same composed expression she had carried through every challenge. Months earlier, most people had expected her to disappear from training within days. Now she stood among those who had earned the right to move forward. Tyler Brooks stood several rows away. He had also made it through. When the ceremony ended and recruits began speaking with family members and friends, Tyler noticed Emma receiving congratulations from instructors who rarely handed out praise. It was the first time he seriously questioned his original judgment. The next phase of Emma's career introduced a new set of challenges. The physical demands remained high, but now technical skill became increasingly important. Navigation, observation, communication, and precision all carried greater weight. During one advanced training course, candidates were asked to estimate distances across a rugged training range. Emma finished her calculations quickly and quietly. An instructor reviewed her worksheet, frowned, and checked it again. Every estimate fell remarkably close to the measured distances. A week later, candidates participated in another evaluation involving target identification under changing weather conditions. Clouds drifted across the sky, while shifting sunlight altered visibility. Several candidates struggled. Emma did not. She remained patient, studying details others overlooked. After the exercise ended, 2 instructors reviewed the results. One pointed to Emma's score sheet. "That is the 3rd time this month." The other nodded. "She sees things differently." Word slowly spread through the training staff. Emma was not dominating every category, but a pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Her attention to detail was exceptional. Her ability to remain calm under pressure seemed almost natural. Most importantly, her performance improved whenever precision mattered. Chief Mason Reed requested permission to observe one of her evaluation sessions personally. He stood near the range as candidates completed another series of tasks. Emma moved through the process with the same disciplined rhythm she had displayed since day one. No wasted motion. No unnecessary conversation. No attempt to impress anyone. When the session concluded, Reed approached one of the instructors. "What do you think?" The instructor glanced toward Emma. "I think she has a gift." Reed folded his arms. "A gift only matters if it survives training." The instructor smiled slightly. "Then it is a good thing she survived the hard part." Months later, Emma received an opportunity that few candidates earned. Her performance evaluations opened the door to specialized sniper training. The selection process remained competitive, and acceptance was far from guaranteed. Yet when her name appeared on the list, very few instructors seemed surprised. Emma studied the paper for several seconds before quietly folding it and placing it into her pocket. She showed no excitement, no celebration, but inside, she understood the significance of the moment. The same qualities that had helped her endure isolation, criticism, and doubt were now creating new opportunities. As she walked away from the training office, Chief Mason Reed watched from across the courtyard. For the first time since meeting her, he allowed himself a small smile. Many recruits fought desperately to prove people wrong. Emma Walker had done something far more difficult. She had simply kept moving forward until the results spoke for themselves. Specialized sniper training proved different from everything Emma Walker had experienced before. The environment was quieter, the expectations were higher, and mistakes that once seemed small suddenly carried enormous consequences. Every detail mattered. Wind direction, temperature, elevation, light conditions, patience, observation. The instructors repeated the same lesson over and over. The rifle was only part of the equation. The person behind it mattered more. Emma adapted quickly. While many candidates focused on equipment, she focused on understanding the environment. Years spent studying distant ridgelines in Montana had given her habits that could not easily be taught. During training exercises, she noticed subtle changes in terrain that others missed. She tracked movement patterns instinctively. Most importantly, she remained calm when conditions became difficult. One afternoon, candidates were assigned a long-range observation exercise. The objective sounded simple. Identify designated markers spread across several miles of varied terrain and report precise details. The exercise lasted hours. Some candidates grew impatient. Others rushed their observations. Emma remained completely focused. When the evaluations were reviewed later that evening, her report ranked first in the class. One instructor leaned back in his chair and shook his head. She missed almost nothing. Another instructor nodded. She sees the entire picture before everyone else notices there is one. As months passed, Emma's reputation quietly grew. She never talked about her scores. She never sought attention. Yet performance created its own kind of recognition. Candidates who had once ignored her now paid attention whenever results were posted. Instructors began using her work as an example during classroom discussions. Even experienced operators occasionally stopped to observe her training sessions. Chief Mason Reed followed her progress from a distance. Every report seemed to confirm what he had suspected years earlier. The qualities that allowed Emma to survive when others doubted her were now becoming strengths. Precision, discipline, consistency, patience. None of them attracted attention at first. Together, they created excellence. Eventually, Emma received orders assigning her to an operational SEAL team. The transition from training to real-world missions introduced an entirely different level of responsibility. Expectations increased immediately. Experience could no longer be simulated. Trust had to be earned. During her first deployment, Emma spent weeks learning team procedures and studying operational environments. Some teammates welcomed her. Others remained uncertain. A few quietly questioned whether someone with limited field experience could handle the pressure. Emma understood their concerns. She did not argue. She focused on preparation. One evening, her team gathered inside a briefing room overlooking a remote mountainous region. Maps covered the walls. Intelligence reports sat stacked across tables. The mission required extensive observation and careful coordination. Team leaders discussed possible challenges while operators reviewed assignments. As the briefing continued, a senior team member pointed toward a section of terrain on the map. "Visibility out there is terrible," he said. "Anyone covering that sector will have almost no margin for error." Several operators exchanged looks. The assignment would require exceptional judgment. Before anyone else responded, Emma studied the map quietly. She noticed terrain features others had overlooked. Natural observation points, wind corridors, sight lines hidden within the landscape. For several moments, she remained silent. Then she calmly suggested an alternative position. The room grew quiet. Experienced operators leaned closer to examine the map. Slowly, heads began to nod. The recommendation solved multiple problems at once. For the first time, several teammates looked at Emma differently. The mission had not even begun, yet she had already demonstrated something important. She belonged there. The mission unfolded across a remote mountain region where weather could change without warning. Days of preparation had led to this moment. Emma Walker and her team occupied carefully selected observation positions overlooking miles of rugged terrain. The air was thin. The wind shifted constantly. Every decision required patience. Every observation mattered. Hours passed with little conversation. Team members monitored assigned sectors while intelligence updates arrived through secure communications. Emma remained focused behind her optics, studying the landscape in front of her. Most people saw rocks, ridges, and shadows. Emma saw patterns. She noticed how wind moved through valleys. She recognized how changing sunlight altered visibility. She paid attention to details others often overlooked. Late in the afternoon, new information arrived from headquarters. Conditions had changed. The team needed additional observation coverage across a section of terrain previously considered too difficult to monitor effectively. Several operators reviewed the request. One quietly shook his head. The distance alone presented significant challenges. Another operator studied the map and reached the same conclusion. The environment left very little room for error. Team leadership reviewed possible options. Then someone pointed toward Emma. She identified that position during the briefing. A few heads turned. The team leader looked at Emma. "Can you cover it?" She studied the terrain again before answering. "Yes." There was no arrogance in her voice. No attempt to impress anyone. Just confidence built through preparation. The adjustment was approved. As daylight slowly faded, Emma settled into her new position. The environment demanded complete concentration. Wind moved unpredictably across multiple ridgelines. Temperatures dropped. Visibility changed minute by minute. Every calculation required precision. Nearby operators occasionally glanced in her direction. They knew the assignment was difficult. Some still wondered whether a relatively new sniper should be handling it. Yet nobody questioned her focus. Hours later, reports began arriving from multiple observation points. Information gathered by the team helped commanders build a clearer picture of activity throughout the region. Several important details came directly from Emma's sector. Patterns, movement routes, terrain advantages. Small observations combined into valuable intelligence. Back at headquarters, analysts reviewed incoming reports. One officer noticed how frequently Emma's observations matched independent surveillance data. Another began comparing previous mission reports. The results were remarkably consistent. Her accuracy stood out, not because she was lucky, not because conditions favored her, because she prepared thoroughly and remained disciplined when others became distracted. As the mission continued, the team leader gathered operators for a brief review. He thanked everyone for their work. Before pausing on one specific point, the alternate observation plan made a difference. Several team members knew exactly what he meant. They looked toward Emma. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then one experienced operator nodded. "Good call." The compliment was brief. In that community, brief compliments often carried the most meaning. Emma simply nodded in return. She had never chased recognition. She cared about results. By the time the team returned home, reports from the operation had already circulated through parts of the SEAL community. People noticed names attached to successful missions. They noticed reliability. They noticed consistency. More importantly, they noticed trust. Years earlier, Emma Walker had struggled just to convince people she belonged. Now experienced operators were actively seeking her input. The transformation had happened so gradually that many never saw it coming. Yet the foundation had been built long ago through patience, resilience, and countless quiet decisions to keep moving forward when everyone expected her to quit. Years passed. Missions came and went. New recruits arrived while veterans retired. Yet one name continued appearing in training reports, operational summaries, and after-action reviews. Emma Walker had become something rare within the SEAL community. Not because she sought attention, not because she told stories about herself, but because her performance remained consistent year after year. Her reputation grew the same way it had started, quietly. one result at a time, one mission at a time, one difficult challenge at a time. Eventually, the recognition became impossible to ignore. During an annual gathering attended by operators, instructors, and commanders from across the community, Emma was invited to receive a Distinguished Marksmanship Award. The ceremony took place inside a large auditorium filled with military personnel and their families. Senior leaders sat in the front rows. Young operators filled the seats farther back. Many knew her name. Some had trained under instructors who used her performance as an example. Others had heard stories about her ability to remain calm under pressure and solve problems others overlooked. As the event began, a large screen displayed highlights from notable careers, accomplishments, milestones, years of service. When Emma's name appeared, the room responded with respectful applause. She sat quietly near the front of the auditorium, looking exactly as she always had. Focused, professional, uncomfortable with attention. Then something unexpected happened. Near the back of the room sat Tyler Brooks. Time had changed him. Experience had changed him. The confidence that once bordered on arrogance had matured into perspective. He watched the screen without speaking. Every achievement listed beside Emma's name reminded him of a different memory. The training grounds, the prediction board, the jokes, the assumptions. Most of all, he remembered the certainty he once felt when judging someone he barely knew. A senior commander stepped onto the stage and began speaking about resilience. He talked about the importance of character. He explained that true excellence rarely announced itself. It revealed itself through consistency, discipline, and perseverance. Then he invited Emma Walker to the stage. The audience stood. Applause filled the auditorium. Emma walked forward and accepted the award with the same calm expression she had carried through every phase of her journey. Looking across the crowd, she saw instructors who had challenged her, teammates who had trusted her, and young operators who now viewed her as an example. She thanked them briefly. No dramatic speech. No celebration. Just gratitude. As the applause continued, Tyler remained seated for a moment. Then he stood and joined everyone else. For the first time, he fully understood what he had failed to see years earlier. Strength was not always loud. Confidence was not always obvious. Potential did not always look the way people expected. Emma Walker had never become successful by proving people wrong. She became successful by refusing to let their opinions define her future. Back on that first day in Coronado, many recruits believed they already knew how her story would end. They looked at her and saw limitations. What they missed was determination. What they overlooked was discipline. What they underestimated was character. The people who once expected her to quit eventually watched her become one of the most respected snipers in the SEAL community. And in the end, the lesson was simple. Respect is earned through actions, not appearances. The strongest person in the room is often the one who quietly keeps moving forward while everyone else is busy making predictions.